were 6 large gray tents, and each one had a black letter on it, A, B, C, D, E, or F. The first 5 tents were for the campers. The counselors slept in F. Sally was assigned to D tent. Mr. Pendenski was his counselor. "My name is easy to remember," said Mr. Pendenski as he shook hands with Stanley just outside the tent. "3 easy words: pen, dance, key." Mr. Sir returned to the office. Mr. Pendenski was younger than Mr. Sir and not nearly as scary-looking. The top of his head was shaped so close it was almost bald, but his face was covered in a thick curly black beard. His nose was badly sunburned. "Mr. Sir isn't really so bad," said Mr. Pendenski. "He's just been in a bad mood ever since he quit smoking. The person you've got to worry about is Warden. There's really only one rule at Camp Green Lake: don't upset the Warden." Stanley nodded as he understood. "I want you to know, Stanley, that I respect you," Mr. Pendenski said. "I understand you've made some bad mistakes in your life. Otherwise you wouldn't be here, but everyone makes mistakes. You may be done some bad things, but that doesn't mean you're a bad kid." Stanley nodded. It seemed pointless to try and tell his counselor that he was innocent. He figured that everyone probably said that. He didn't want Mr. Pendenski to think that he had a bad attitude. "I'm going to help you turn your life around," said his counselor, "and you're going to have some help too." "Can I count on your help?" "Yes, sir," Stanley said. Mr. Pendenski said, "Good," and patted Stanley on the back. 2 boys, each carrying a shovel, were coming across the compound. Mr. Pendenski called to them, "Rex, Alan, I want you to come and say hello to Stanley. He's the newest member of our team." The boys glanced wearily at Stanley. They were dripping with sweat, and their faces were so dirty that it took Stanley a moment to notice that one kid was white and the other was black. "What happened to Barfback?" asked the black kid. "Lewis is still in the hospital," said Mr. Pendenski. "He won't be returning." He told the boys to come shake Stanley's hand and introduce themselves, like gentlemen. "Hi," the white kid grunted. "That's Alan," said Mr. Pendenski. "My name is not Alan," the boy said. "It's Squid, and that's X-Ray." "Hey," said X-Ray. He smiled and shook Stanley's hand. He wore glasses, but they were so dirty that Stanley wondered how he could see out of them. Mr. Pendenski told Alan to go to rec hall and bring the other boys to meet Stanley. Then he led him inside the tent. There were 7 cots, each one less than 2 feet from the one next to it. "Which was Lewis' cot?" Mr. Pendenski asked. "Barfback slept here," said X-Ray, kicking at one of the beds. "All right, Stanley, that'll be yours," said Mr. Pendenski. Stanley looked at the cot and nodded. He wasn't particularly thrilled about sleeping in the same cot that had ever used by somebody named Barfback. 7 crates were stacked in 2 piles on one side of the tent. The open end of the crates faced outward. Stanley put his backpack, changed on clothes, and towel in what used to be Barfback's crate. It was at the bottom of the stack that had 3 in it. Squid returned with 4 other boys. The first 3 were introduced by Mr. Pendenski as Joss, Theodore, and Ricky. They called themselves Magnet, Armpit, and Zigzag. "They all have nicknames," explained Mr. Pendenski. "However, I prefer to use the names their parents gave them, the names that Society will recognize them by when you return to become useful and hard-working members of Society." "It ain't just a nickname," X-Ray told Mr. Pendenski. He tapped the rim of his glass. "I can see inside you, Mom. You've got a big fat heart." The last boy either didn't have a real name or else he didn't have a nickname. Both Mr. Pendenski and X-Ray called him Zero. "Do you know why his name is Zero?" asked Mr. Pendenski. "Because there's nothing inside his head." He smiled and playfully shook Zero's shoulder. Zero said nothing. "And that's Mom," a boy said. Mr. Pendenski smiled at him. "If it makes you feel better call me Mom, Theodore. Go ahead and call me Mom." He turned to Stanley. If you have questions, Theodore will help you. You got it, Theodore? I'm depending on you. Theodore spit a thin line of saliva between his teeth, causing some of the other boys to complain about the need to keep their home sanitary. You were all new here once, said Mr. Pendinsky, and you all know what it feels like. I'm counting on every one of you to help Stanley. Stanley looked at the ground. Mr. Pendinsky left the tent, and soon the other boys began to file out as well, taking their towels and change of clothes with them. Stanley was relieved to be left alone, but he was so thirsty he felt as if he would die if he didn't get something to drink soon. Hey, Theodore, he asked, going after him, do you know where I can fill my canteen? Theodore whirled and grabbed Stanley by his collar. My name's not Theodore, he said. It's Armpit. He drew Stanley to the ground. Stanley stared at him, terrified. There's a water spigot on the wall of the shower stall. Thanks, Armpit, said Stanley. As he watched the boy turn and walk away, he couldn't afford the life of him figure out why anyone would want to call Armpit. In a way, it made him feel a little better about having to sleep in a cot that had been used by somebody named Barfbag. Maybe it was a term of respect. 6. Stanley took a shower, if you could call it that, ate dinner, if you call it that, and went to bed, if you could call his smelly and scratchy cot a bed. Because of the scarcity of water, every camper was only allowed a 4-minute shower. It took Stanley nearly that long to get used to the cold water. There was no enough for hot water. He kept stepping into it and jumping back from the spray until the water shut off automatically. He never managed to use his bar of soap, which was just as well, because he wouldn't have time to rinse off the suds. Dinner was some kind of stewed meat and vegetables. The meat was brown and the vegetables has once been green. Everything tasted pretty much the same. He ate it all and used a slice of white bread to mop up the juice. Stanley had never been one to leave food on his plate, no matter how it tasted. What'd you do? One of the campers asked him. At first, Stanley didn't know what he meant. They sent you here for a reason. Oh, he realized. I stole a pair of sneakers. The other boys thought that was funny. Stanley wasn't sure why. Maybe because their crimes were a lot worse than stealing shoes from a store, or were they on someone's feet? Asked Squid. Neither, Stanley answered. They belonged to Clyde Livingston. Nobody believed him. No, sweet feet, said X-Ray. Yeah, right. No way, said Squid. Now, as Stanley lay on his cot, he thought it was kind of funny in a way. Nobody believed him when he said he was innocent. Now, when he said he stole them, nobody believed him either. Clyde Sweetfeet Livingston was a famous baseball player. He led the American League in stolen bases over the last 3 years. He was also the only player in history to ever hit 4 triples in one game. Stanley had a poster of him hanging on the wall of his bedroom. He used to have the poster anyway. He didn't know where it was now. It had been taken by the police and was used as evidence of his guilt in the courtroom. Clyde Livingston also came to court. In spite of everything, when Stanley found out Sweetfeet was going to be there, he was actually excited about the prospect of meeting his hero. Clyde Livingston testified that they were his sneakers and that he had donated them to help raise money for the homeless shelter. He said he couldn't imagine what kind of horrible person would steal from homeless children. That was the worst part for Stanley. The hero thought he was no good, dirty, rotten thief. As Stanley tried to turn over to his cot, he was afraid it was going to collapse under all his weight. He barely fit in it. When he finally managed to roll over his stomach, the smell was so bad that he had to turn over again and try sleeping on his back. The cot smelled like sour milk. Though it was nice, the air was still very warm. Armpit was snoring 2 cots away. Back at school, a bully named Derek Dunning used to torment Stanley. The teachers never took Stanley's complaints seriously because Derek was so much smaller than Stanley. Some teachers even seemed to find it amusing that a little kid like Derek could pick on someone as big as Stanley. On the day Stanley was arrested, Derek has taken Stanley's notebook and, after a long game of come and get it, finally dropped it in the toilet in the boys' bathroom. By the time Stanley retrieved it, he had missed his bus and had to walk home. It was while he was walking home, carrying his wet notebook with the prospect of having to copy the ruined pages, that the Snickers fell from the sky. "I was walking home and the Snickers fell from the sky," he had told the judge. "One hit me on the head." It had hurt, too. They hadn't exactly fallen from the sky. He had just walked out from under a freeway overpass when the shoe hit him on the head. Stanley took it as some kind of sign. His father had been trying to figure out a way to recycle his sneakers, and suddenly a pair of sneakers fell on top of him, seemingly out of nowhere, like a gift from God. Naturally, he had no way of knowing they belonged to Clyde Livingston. In fact, the shoes were anything but sweet. Whoever had worn them had had a bad case of foot odor. Stanley couldn't help but think that there was something special about the shoes, that they would somehow provide the key to his father's invention. It was too much of a coincidence to be a mere accident. Stanley had felt like he was holding Destiny's shoe. He ran. Thinking back now, he wasn't sure why he ran. Maybe he was in a hurry to bring the shoes to his father. Maybe he was trying to run away from his miserable and humiliating day at the school. A patrol car pulled alongside him. A policeman asked him why he was running. Then he took the shoes and made a call on his radio. Shortly thereafter, Stanley was arrested. It turned out the sneakers had been stolen from a display at the homeless shelter. That evening, rich people were going to come to the shelter and pay $100 to eat the food that the poor people ate every day for free. Clyde Livingston, who had once lived in the shelter when he was younger, was going to speak and sign autographs. His shoes would be auctioned, as it was expected that they would sell for over $5,000. All the money would go help the homeless. Because of the baseball schedule, Stanley's trial was delayed several months. His parents couldn't afford a lawyer. "You don't need a lawyer," his mother had said. "Just tell the truth." Stanley told the truth, but perhaps it would have been better if he had lied a little. He could have said he found the shoes in the street. No one believed they fell from the sky. It wasn't destiny, he realized. It was his no-good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. The judge called Stanley's crime despicable. The shoes were valued at over $5,000, and it's money that you provide food and shelter for the homeless. And you stole that from them just so you could have the souvenir. The judge said that there was an opening at Camp Green Lake, and he suggested that the discipline of the camp might improve Stanley's character. That is either that or jail. Stanley's parents asked him if they could go have some time to find out more about Camp Green Lake, but the judge advised them to make a quick decision. Vacancies don't last long at Camp Green Lake. 7. The shovel felt heavy in Stanley's soft, fleshy hands. He tried to jam it into the earth, but the blade banged against the ground and bounced off without making a dent. The vibrations ran up the shaft of the shovel and into Stanley's wrist, making his bones rattle. It was still dark. The only light came from the moon and the stars, more stars than Stanley had ever seen before. It seemed as if he had just gotten to sleep when Mr. Pendersky came in and woke everyone up. Using all his might, he brought the shovel back down into the dry lake bed. The voice stung his hands but made no impression on the earth. He wondered if he had a defective shovel. He glanced at Zero, about 15 feet away, who scooped out a shovelful of dirt and dumped it on the pile that it was already almost foot tall. For breakfast, they'd been served some kind of lukewarm cereal. The best part was the orange juice. They each got a pink carton. The cereal actually didn't taste too bad, but it smelled just like its cod. Then they filled their canteens, got their shovels, and were marched out across the lake. Each group was assigned a different area. The shovels were kept in the shed near the showers. They all looked the same to Stanley, although X-Ray had his own special shovel, which no one else was allowed to use. X-Ray claimed it was shorter than the others, but if it was only by the fraction of an inch. The shovels were 5 feet long from the tip of the steel blade to the end of the wooden shaft. Stanley's hole would have to be as deep as his shovel, and he'd have to be able to lay the shovel flat across the bottom in any direction. That is why X-Ray wanted the shortest shovel. The lake was so full of holes and mounds that it reminded Stanley of pictures he'd seen on the moon. If you find anything interesting or unusual, Mr. Pendenski had told him, you should report it either to me or Mr. Sir when we come around with the water truck. If the warden likes what you found, you'll get the rest of the day off. What are we supposed to be looking for? Stanley asked him. You're not looking for anything. You're digging to build character. It's just if you find anything, the warden should like to know about it. He glanced helplessly at his shovel. It wasn't defective. He was defective. He noticed a thin crack in the ground. He placed the point of his shovel on top of it, then jumped on the back with blade both feet. The shovel sank a few inches into the packed earth. He smiled. For once in his life, it paid to be overweight. He leaned on the shaft and pried up his first shovelful of dirt, then dumped it off to the side. Only 10 million more to go, he thought. Then placed the shovel back in its crack and jumped on it again. He unearthed several shovelfuls of dirt in its manner before it occurred to him that he was dumping his dirt within the perimeter of his hole. Laid his shovel flat on the ground and marked where the edges of his hole would be 5 feet or softly wide. He moved the dirt he'd already dug up past his mark. He took a drink from his canteen. 5 feet would be awfully deep, too. The digging got easier after a while. The ground was hardest at the surface when the sun had baked a crust about 8 inches deep. Beneath it, the earth was looser. But by this time, Stanley broke past the crust. The blisters formed in the middle of his right thumb, and it was hard to hold the shovel. Stanley's great-great-grandfather was named Ella Yeltmans. He was born in Latvia. When he was 5 years old, he fell in love with Mary Mankey. 15 years old, he fell in love with Mary Mankey. He didn't know he was Stanley's great-great-grandfather. Mary Mankey was 14. She will turn 16 in 2 months, at which time her father decided she should be married. Yella went to her father to ask for her hand, but so did Igor Barkov, the pig farmer. Igor was 57 years old. He had a red nose and fat, puffy cheeks. I will trade you my fattest pig for your daughter, Igor offered. And what have you got? Mira's father asked Ella. A heart full of love, said Elia. I'd rather have a fat pig, said Mira's father. Desperate, Elia went to see Madame Zeroni, an old Egyptian woman who lived at the edge of the town. He had become friends with her, though she was quite a bit older than him. She was even older than Igor Barkov. The elder boys of his village liked to mud wrestle. Elia preferred visiting Madame Zeroni than listening to her many stories. Madame Zeroni has dark skin and a very white mouth. When she looked at you, her eyes seemed to expand, and it felt like she was looking right through you. Elia was wrong, she asked before he even told her he was upset. He was sitting in a homemade wheelchair. She had no foot. Her legs stopped at her ankle. I'm in love with Mira Mankey, Elia confessed, but Igor Barkov had offered to trade his fattest pig for her. I can't compete with that. Good, said Madame Zeroni. You're too young to get married. You've got your whole life ahead of you. But I love Mira. Mira's head is as empty as a flower pot. But she's beautiful. So is the flower pot. Can she push a pillow? Can she milk? No, she's too delicate. Can she have an intelligent conversation? No, she's silly and foolish. Will she take care of you when you're sick? No, she's spoiled and will only want you to take care of her. So if she's beautiful, so what? Ptooey. Madame Zerani spat in the dirt. She told Elia that he should go to America. Like my son, there's where your future lives. No one marry Maggie. But Elia wouldn't hear none of that. He was 15, and all he could see was Mira's shallow beauty. Madame Zarin hated to see Elia so forlorn. Against her better judgment, she agreed to help him. It just so happens my soul gave birth to a litter of piglets yesterday, she said. There is only little runt who she won't suckle. You may have him. He will die anyway. Madame Zerny led Elliot around the back of her house where she kept her pigs. Elliot took tiny piglet, but he didn't see what good it would do him. It wasn't much bigger than a rat. He'll grow, Madame Zerny assured him. Do you see the mountain on the edge of the forest? Yeah, said Elliot. On the top of the mountain there is a stream where the water runs uphill. You must carry the piglet every day to the top of the mountain and let it drink from the stream. As it drinks, you are to sing to him. She told Elliot a special song to sing to a pig. One day, the mare's 15th birthday, you should carry the pig up the mountains for the last time and take it directly to Mare's father. It'll be fatter than any of Igor's pigs. If it is that big and fat, asked Celia, how will I be able to carry it up the mountain? The piglet is not too heavy for you now, is it? Asked Madame Zerny. Of course not, said Elia. Do you think it'll be too heavy for you tomorrow? No. Every day you will carry the pig up the mountain. It'll get a little bigger, but you will get a little stronger. After I gave the pig to Mare's father, I want you to do one more thing to me. Anything, said Elia. I want you to carry me up the mountain. I want to drink from the stream, and I want you to sing the song to me. Elia promised he would. Madame Zerny warned that if he failed to do this, he and his descendants would be doomed for all eternity. At the time, Elliot thought nothing of the curse. He was just a 15-year-old kid, and eternity didn't seem much longer than a week from Tuesday. Besides, he liked Madame Zerny, who would be glad to carry up the mountain. He would have done it right then and there, but he wasn't yet strong enough. Stanley was still digging. His hole was about 3 feet deep, but only in the center, and sloped upward to the edges. The sun had only just come up from the horizon, but he already could feel its hot rays against his face. As he reached down to pick up his canteen, he felt a sudden rush of dizziness and put his hands on his knee to steady himself. For a moment he was afraid he would throw up, but the moment passed. He drank the last drop of water from his canteen. He had blisters on every one of his fingers, and one at the center of each palm. Everyone else's hole was a lot deeper than his. He couldn't actually see their holes, but could tell by the size of their dirt piles. He saw a cloud of the dust moving across the wasteland and noticed that the other boys had stopped digging and were watching it too. The dirt cloud moved closer, and he could see that it trailed behind the red pickup truck. The truck stopped near where they were digging, and the boys lined up behind it. X-Ray in front, Zero at the rear. Stanley got in line behind Zero. Mr. Sir filled each one of their canteens from a tank of water in the bed of the pickup. Then he took Stanley's canteen from him. He said, "This isn't the Girl Scouts, is it?" Stanley raised and lowered one shoulder. Mr. Sir followed Stanley back to his hole to see how much he was doing. "You'd better get with it," he said, "or else you're going to be digging in the hottest part of the day." He popped some sunflower seeds into his mouth. The fly removed the shells with his teeth and spat them into Stanley's hole. Every day, Elia carried the little piglet up the mountain and sang it to it as it drank from the stream. As the pig grew fatter, Elia got stronger. On the day of Mira's 15th birthday, Elia's pig weighed over 50 stones. Madame Zarania told him to carry the pig up the mountain on that day as well, but Elia didn't want to present him to Mira smelling like a pig. Instead, he took a bath. It was his second bath in less than a week. Then he led the pig to Mira's. Igor Barkov was there with his pig as well. There were two of the finest pigs I've ever seen, Mira's father declared. He was also impressed with Elia, who seemed to have grown bigger and stronger in the last 2 months. I used to think you were a good-for-nothing book reader, he said, but I see now you could be an excellent mud wrestler. Can I marry your daughter? Elia boldly asked. First, I must weigh the pigs. Alas, poor Elia should have carried his pig up the mountain one last time. The two pigs weighed exactly the same. Some blisters have ripped open and new blisters formed. He kept changing his grip on the shovel to try to avoid the pain. Finally, Reuben removed his cap and held it between the shaft of the shovel with his raw hands. This helped, but digging was harder because the cap would slip and slide. The sun beat down on the unprotected head and neck. Though he tried to convince himself otherwise, he had been aware for a while that his piles of dirt was too close to his hole. The piles were outside his 5-foot circle, but he could see he was going to run out of the room. So he pretended other, then kept adding more dirt to the piles that he would eventually have to move. The problem was that when the dirt was on the ground, it was compacted. It expanded when it was excavated. The piles were a lot bigger than his hole was deep. It was either now or later. Reluctantly, he climbed up out of his hole and once again dug his shovel into his previously dug dirt. Mira's father got down on his hands and knees and closely examined each pig, tail to snout. Those are two of the finest pigs I've ever seen, he said at last. How am I to decide it? I have only one daughter. Why not let Mira decide, suggested Elia. That's so preposterous, exclaimed Igor, spelling salva as he spoke. Mira is just an empty-headed girl, said her father. How can she possibly decide when I, her father, can't? She knows how it feels in her heart, said Elia. Mira's father rubbed his chin. Then he laughed and said, Why not? He slapped Elia on the back. It doesn't matter to me. A pig is a pig. He summoned his daughter. Elia blushed when Mira entered the room. Good afternoon, Mira, he said. She looked at him. You're Elia, right? She asked. Mira, said her father. Elia and Igor have each offered a pig for your hand in marriage. If it doesn't matter to me, a pig is a pig. So I will let you make the choice. Whom do you wish to marry? Mira looked confused. Would you want me to decide? That's right, my blossom, said her father. Gee, I don't know, said Mira. Which pig weighs more? They both weigh the same, said her father. Golly, said Mira. I guess I should choose Ella. No, Igor. No, Ella. No, Igor. Oh, I know. I think of a number between 1 and 10. I'll marry whoever guesses the closest number. Okay, I'm ready. 10, guessed Igor. Elia said nothing. Elia? Said Mira. What number do you guess? Elia didn't pick a number. Marry Igor, he muttered. You can keep my pig as a wedding present. The next time the water truck came, it was driven by Mr. Pendinsky, who also brought sack lunches. Stanley sat with his back against a pile of dirt and ate. He had a bologna sandwich, potato chips, and a large chocolate chip cookie. How you doing? Asked Magnet. Not really good, said Stanley. Well, the first hole's the hardest, Magnet said. Stanley took a long deep breath. He couldn't afford to doodle. He was way behind the others, and the sun just kept getting hotter. It wasn't even noon yet, but he didn't know if he had the strength to stand up. He thought about quitting. He wondered what they would do to him. What could they do to him? His clothes were soaked with sweat. In school, he had learned that sweating was good for you. It is nature's way of keeping you cool. So why was he so hot? Using his shovel for supper, he managed to get on his feet. Where are we supposed to go to the bathroom? He asked Magnet. Magnet gestured with his arm to the great expanse around them. Pick a hole, any hole, he said. Stanley staggered across the lake, almost falling over a dirt pile. Behind him, he heard Magnet say, "But first make sure nothing's living in it." After leaving Mira's house, Elliot wandered aimlessly through the town until he found himself down a wharf. He stood on the edge of a pier and stared down into the cold black water. He could not understand how Mira had trouble declining between him and Igor. He thought she loved him, even if she didn't love him. Couldn't she see what the fool Parson and Igor was? It was like Madame Zernia said. Her head was as empty as a flower pot. Someone was gathering in another dock, and he went to see what was going on. A sign read, "Deckhands wanted, free passage to America." He had no sailing experience, but the ship's captain signed him abroad. The captain could see that Elliot was a man of great strength. Not everybody could carry a full-grown pig up the side of a mountain. It wasn't until the ship had cleared the harbor and was heading right across the Atlantic that he suddenly remembered his promise to carry Madame Zerine up the mountain. He felt terrible. He wasn't afraid of the curse. He thought there was a lot of nonsense. Felt bad because he knew Madame Zerine had wanted to drink from the stream before she died. Daryl was the smallest kid in Group D, but he was the first one to finish digging. "You're finished?" Stanley asked eventually. Sarah said nothing. Stanley walked to Zara's hole and watched him measure it with a shovel. The top of his hole was a perfect circle, and the sides were smooth and steep. No one dirt clod more than necessary had been removed from the earth. Zara pulled himself up to the surface. He didn't even smile. He looked down at his perfectly dug hole, spat in it, and turned and headed back to the camp compound. "Sarah's one weird dude," said Zigzag. Stanley would have laughed, but he didn't have the strength. Zigzag had to be the weirdest dude Stanley had ever seen. He had a long skinny neck and a big round head with fine, well-frizzy blonde hair that stuck out in all directions. His head seemed to be bobbed up and down on his neck like it was on a spring. Armpit was the second one to finish digging. He also spat into his hole before heading back to camp compound. One by one, Stanley watched each of the boys spit into his hole and return to the camp compound. Stanley kept digging. His hole was almost up to his shoulder, although it is hard to tell exactly where ground level was because his dirt piles completely surrounded the hole. The deeper it got, the harder it was to raise the dirt up and out of the hole. Once again, he realized it is going to have to remove the piles. His cap was stained with blood from his hands. He felt like he was digging his own grave. In America, Elliot learned to speak English, fell in love with a woman named Sarah Miller. He could push a pillow, milk a goat, and most important thing for herself. She and Elliot often stayed up half the night talking and laughing together. Their life was not easy. Elliot worked hard, but bad luck seemed to follow him everywhere. He always seemed to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He remembers Madame Zeriny telling him that she had a son in America. Elliot was forever looking for him. He would walk up to complete strangers and ask him if he knew someone named Zeriny or had even heard of anyone named Zeriny. No one did. Elliot wasn't sure what he'd do if he ever found Madame Zerini's son anyway. Carry him up a mountain and sing a pig's lullaby to him? After his burn was struck by lightning for the third time, he told Sarah about his broken promise to Madame Zerini. "I'm worse than a pig thief," he said. "You should leave me and find someone who isn't cursed." "I'm not leaving you," said Sarah, "but I want you to do one thing for me." "Anything," said Elliot. Sarah smiled. "Sing me the pig lullaby." He sang it for her. Her eyes sparkled. "That's so pretty. What does it mean?" Stanley tried his best to translate it from Latvian into English, but it wasn't the same. It rhymes with Latvian, he told her. I could tell, said Sarah. A year later, their child was born. Sarah named him Stanley because she noticed that Stanley was Yelton's sped backward. Sarah changed the words from a pig lullaby so that it rhymed, and every night he sang it to little Stanley. Stanley's hole was as deep as a shovel, but not quite wide enough off the bottom. He grimaced as he sliced off a chunk of dirt and raised it up and flung it onto the pile. He laid his shovel back down on the bottom of his hole, and to his surprise, it fit, rotated, and only had to chip a few chunks of dirt here and there before he could lie flat across his hole in every direction. He heard the water trunk approaching and felt a strange sense of pride at being able to show Mr. Sir and Mr. Pendenski that he had dug his first hole. He put his hands on the rim and tried to pull himself up. He couldn't do it. His arms were too weak to leave his heavy body. He used his legs to help, but it just didn't have any strength. He was trapped in his hole. It was almost funny, but he wasn't in the mood to laugh. Stanley, he heard Mr. Pendenski call. Using his shovel, he dug 2 full holes in the whole wall. He climbed out to see Mr. Pendenski walking over to him. I was afraid you fainted, Mr. Pendenski said. You wouldn't have been the first. I'm finished, Stanley said, putting his blood-spotted cap back on his head. All right, said Mr. Pendenski, raising his hand for a high five, but Stanley ignored it. He didn't have the strength. Mr. Pendenski lowered his hand and he looked down at Stanley's hole. Well done, he said. You want to ride back? Stanley shook his head. I'll walk. Mr. Pendenski climbed back into the truck without feeling Stanley's canteen. Stanley waited for him to drive away, then took another look at his hole. He knew it was nothing to be proud of, but he felt proud nonetheless. He stuck up his last bit of celibate and spat. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe me, and have a great day. Bye-bye.